The Book with No Ending. Audio Story. Part 1. The Seductive Tome. The soft tinkle of the bell above the door announced Emma's arrival at Antiquarian Books, her literary sanctuary in the heart of the old city. This place held an almost sacred quality for her, the scent of aged paper and leather bindings instantly transporting her to worlds beyond imagination. As she inhaled deeply, allowing the familiar aroma to envelop her senses, a contented smile played across her lips. This was her happy place, a refuge from the stresses of daily life where she could lose herself in the printed word. Nodding a greeting to Mr. Pemberton, the elderly proprietor, Emma wove between the towering wooden bookshelves, her fingers lightly caressing the spines as she perused the titles. Her footsteps were the only sound, muffled by the plush crimson carpet. Though she'd visited countless times before, there was always a childlike sense of wonder and excitement coursing through her veins when surrounded by so many unread stories waiting to be discovered. As her gaze roved over the meticulously organized shelves, a flash of deep crimson captured her attention from the corner librarium. There, nestled between two ancient leather-bound tomes, sat a book that seemed to radiate an otherworldly allure. Emma's breath hitched as she drew closer, her eyes roving over the intricate golden embellishments that danced across the burgundy cover like flickering flames in the fireplace. Reaching out with a trembling hand, she traced the embossed letters of the title, The Book with No Ending. A shiver of delicious anticipation danced along her spine as she carefully pulled the weighty volume from the shelf. Despite its obvious age, the binding was as supple as the day it had been crafted, the gilded pages crisp and unblemished. Cradling the mysterious tome in her arms like a treasured relic, Emma settled into the overstuffed velvet armchair beside the window. Tendrils of afternoon sunlight filtered through the wavy antique glass, casting a warm golden glow over the room. With a reverence befitting the opening of an ancient artifact, she gently turned the cover. The first few pages were inscribed in an elegant yet indecipherable script, the lettering alien and otherworldly. But as she turned the crackling parchment, the words gradually transitioned into the common tongue she knew so well. A faint tingling sensation danced across Emma's fingertips as she traced the opening lines, her breath already growing shallow with anticipation. The story began simply enough, painting the picture of a young woman named Lilith whose life, on the surface, seemed utterly ordinary. Yet with each turn of the page, the narrative took increasingly unsettling twists and turns, weaving tendrils of the supernatural into the fabric of the mundane world in the most insidious of ways. Emma's surroundings gradually faded from awareness as she became utterly enraptured, the vivid imagery bleeding from the pages in lurid detail. She could hear the ghostly whispers that plagued Lilith's everyday existence, sense the ominous presence lurking just beyond the veil of her reality. The hairs along the nape of Emma's neck rose as dread crept into the pit of her stomach. This was no ordinary tale. The young woman's desperate attempts to rationalize away the strange occurrences unfolding around her only made the sinister undercurrent more palpable. Emma's heart pounded as Lilith's world spiraled deeper into darkness with every chapter, ancient forces beyond her comprehension seeping through the shredding barriers between realms. With each turn of the leaf, it became more difficult for Emma to separate fact from fiction, reality from fantasy. A bone-deep chill seeped into her blood as shadows seemed to stretch and distort in her peripheral vision. Surely it was a trick of the fading light, wasn't it? She shuddered, her fingers tightening around the book's spine. Lost in the hypnotic cadence of the narrative, Emma scarcely noticed as the last rays of dusk faded beyond the shop's leaded windows. One by one, the gas lamps flickered to life, casting a dull orange glow over the shadowed stacks. Had she truly been reading for hours on end? It scarcely seemed possible, yet delicious tendrils of anticipation lapped at her resolve to stay grounded in reality. She had to keep reading, had to discover what fate awaited poor, doomed Lilith. The rituals and incantations described in such meticulous detail filled Emma's mind with forbidden knowledge, setting her teeth on edge. This went far beyond the supernatural tales she typically favored. This book held true power, the kind of ancient wisdom that could unravel the underpinnings of one's sanity if not treated with the utmost care. Yet that same sinister lure made it utterly impossible for Emma to tear herself away. As the chiming of the midnight hour echoed through the empty streets outside, the young woman found herself utterly transfixed, trapped between the pages in a waking nightmare. Darker and darker the passages grew, describing realms of shadow and despair as Lilith's world became a Pandora's box of horrors, until the lines blurred completely. Where did the book end and Emma's existence begin? Trembling hands caressed the ominous words, her vision blurring as an invisible force pressed in from all sides. The air thickened until each ragged breath burned her lungs, the shadows seeming to writhe and contort into twisted, inhuman forms. Hands clasped over her mouth to stifle a scream as soulless eyes bored into her from every dark corner of the room. Despite every fiber of her being screaming to slam the abomination shut, Emma's fingers deftly turned the page. A perverse fascination, or perhaps some deeper cosmic forces, compelled her to keep reading no matter how much dread and revulsion coiled within her gut. Tears of terror streaked her ashen cheeks as she plunged deeper into madness with each lurid passage, unable to extricate herself from the all-consuming narrative. The descent down that nightmare path reached its apotheosis in the final chapters as the world of the book bled into reality. Horrific monstrosities slithered from between the seams, their depravity so immense and fundamentally wrong that Emma's psyche teetered on the precipice. Phantom tendrils caressed her clammy skin, raising goose flesh, as the unmistakable stench of decay wafted from the pages. Or was it merely her imagination, that final shred of sanity attempting to maintain control? Screwing her eyes shut in a futile attempt to block out the visions left Emma's other senses defenseless against the assault. She could hear them now, the skittering approach of countless forms scuttling through the eternal night. Grotesque sounds of rending and tearing, punctuated by anguished shrieks of the damned, echoed through the hollows of her mind. By the time Emma reached the final page, she felt as though her very soul had been flayed, leaving her raw and exposed to the incomprehensible forces described in sickening detail. Harsh breaths raked her lungs in ragged gasps as her world tilted on its axis. Yet there was no conclusion to be found, no final resolution to bring peace. Only 3 words, inked in crimson that glistened wetly in the low light. To be continued.